Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. It's always a lot of fun to manage tier lists, and I feel like it's time to finally update my tier list for mid lane patch 6.13. Now I have been updating this specific list every 2 patches because usually it does take 2 patches for enough things to change in order to warrant a completely new video. But if something major were to happen in, for example, the next patch, then definitely I will update this video once again. But either way, here we are with the top 5 best mid laners for patch 6.13. Now right before we jump into champion number 5, the question of this video is going to be, what is your current favorite or best mid lane champion to play in the current patch? And as usual, if you guys end up enjoying this video for whatever reason, make sure to let me know by hitting the like button. Alright, so champion number 5. Now most people already know this, but usually whenever I do these top 5 lists, I always like to make the champion at number 5 be somewhat of a wild card. Some champion that maybe isn't 100% meta, maybe doesn't have the best win rate in the world, but I like to put a champion here that, in my honest opinion, I personally believe to be very strong. And Xerath is that champion for this video. This guy, in my opinion, is underrated, and I really feel like he's slowly making his way back into the meta, and very slowly people are starting to realize, you know what? This guy is actually still quite strong. Why are we not playing him? I mean, he has a lot of lane pressure if you play him correctly. I faced a Xerath before as Zed and I just couldn't do anything to him. And I played Xerath against a Syndra and she just simply could not do anything to me. It's just a matter of, do you hit your skill shots or not? I mean, if you do, you're gonna have a lot of lane pressure. It'll be hard to deal with you and you will be very strong. But obviously, if you miss every single ability you ever throw in your life, you're gonna be kind of useless. But on top of this, he scales very well into the late game. He's gonna be dishing out an insane amount of damage. He has very solid wave clear with a Q and a W. He has very long range as well, which doesn't really feel like it's the current meta having these very high poke type champions, but again, Xerath I do feel like is coming back. His siege power is obviously naturally just very good as well, and he can easily catch people off when they're running away with low HP from a battle with his ultimate. Especially now that it has that very beautiful quality of life buff, where when you do use Xerath's ultimate, it'll now sort of zoom out your camera, very similar to how it works with Jin's ultimate. All in all, Xerath in my opinion is just a very hard champion to deal with. It's really hard to just flat out beat him in the laning phase because he's always just so far back spamming abilities. He has the mana regeneration in his passive, which does help his laning phase a lot. And all in all, this guy is going to be doing a lot of damage, and I'm surprised we don't see him more often, but honestly, part of me is also a little bit happy. Now unfortunately, the negatives of Xerath is the fact that he does not have any escapes in his kit, which isn't the worst thing in the world because he is a very long range mage. He isn't necessarily just flat out meta because he doesn't really build the meta AP type items except for maybe the Rala's Crystal Scepter at times. And he is purely skill shot oriented, which goes without saying. Either you'll be doing very well and being an absolute monster, or you'll be missing everything and be very weak and probably more useless than a minion. But either way guys, here are my recommended items, runes, and masteries when playing Xerath at the very moment. All in all, quite self-explanatory. I mean, Thunderlords is obviously the best one because it makes you have so much more damage and burst. Luden's Echo complements his kit and his siege power, and everything else should be quite obvious. But moving into champion number 4 is going to be Cassiopeia. Now I feel like the 4 champions I'll be talking about from now on are all very strong champions, and I would highly recommend playing any of them. Cassiopeia is without question no exception. I mean, she has just so much damage in her kit, she fits the meta. I seriously believe her W is one of the best non-ultimate type abilities. And the fact that her passive, well, passively gives her move speed, which opens up a whole extra item slot for another AP item, it really does feel just absolutely amazing when you finally get 6 AP items and you're still moving more or less the same move speed as everyone else in the game. So it does sort of go without saying that she scales like an absolute beast into the late game. She still has a very high amount of lane pressure, but unfortunately she will run out of mana much quicker. But she will be shredding through the tanks that are still somewhat popular in this current meta. She can still fight bruisers because not only is she going to be shredding through them, but her W will counter most of the bruisers, and her well-timed ultimate will also stop them in their place. On top of this, Dragon and Baron have been very important objectives as of late, so having a champion that can shred through those as well, and Cassiopeia being a prime example of someone that can, is a very welcomed plus. For the most part, Cassiopeia also feels a little bit easier to play ever since the rework. Now I have to say her W can feel a bit awkward to get used to, but the overall skill cap of the champion has definitely went down. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because arguably the power of the champion hasn't really been all that effective. expected. Now the negatives of Cassiopeia is no escapes in her kit, and she will have very little move speed for about half of the game since she obviously cannot buy any boots. Her W can be awkward to use if you're not used to it, so it will take a few games, and her ultimate delay is a little bit easy to react to, especially if you're playing against very good players. But either way, Cassiopeia in my opinion has to be one of the best mid lane champions at the very moment, and I highly recommend trying her out and picking her up. And if you do end up picking up this champion, then here's my recommended build. Deathfire Touch is usually the safest option to go, but you can always go with Thunderlords in your masteries instead for more lane dominance. Other than that, you want to go for the Archangel Staff because you want more mana, Rod of Ages if you're playing top lane Cassiopeia or the enemy team has a lot of dive, else you just go straight for the Abyssal. But other than that, everything should be somewhat self-explanatory. But let's go into champion number 3, someone I'm sure a lot of people are getting a little bit sick of seeing absolutely everywhere, Malzahar. Honestly, part of me is also a little bit sick of seeing Malzahar, but whenever I'm looking at statistics and just checking out how champions are doing in every single role, Malzahar consistently seems to be a top tier mid laner. His win rate is still absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's just simply through the roof. Overall, the champion is still not the most difficult in the entire world. I mean, you can push in waves fairly easily as well. He has the percent damage from his ultimate, which can easily shred tanks. He builds a lot of the OP items, you know, things like Rod of Ages, things like a Rala's Crystal Scepter, even a Liandry's Torment if the enemy team just has an abundance of tanky champions. But what makes this even better on Malzahar specifically is the fact that his E ability synergizes with Liandry's Torment and Rala's Crystal Scepter beautifully. If a target ever gets just completely out of control, Malzahar can always lock them down with his ultimate, and even if they Q assess his ultimate, yes, they'll be able to move, but the Malzahar ultimate damage will still be going through. Now usually whenever a champion does not have any escapes in their kit, I like to list that as a negative or as a con of the champion, but Malzahar's passive sort of makes up for that. Because even if he were to get caught out by a skill shot, maybe like a Thresh Q or something of the sort, maybe an Ash Arrow, as long as his passive is up, it's kind of like he didn't really get caught. And just like Cassiopeia, he can also shred objectives like Baron and Dragon because of the sheer number of Voidlings he's able to create now. Which also, if I haven't mentioned yet, synergize very well with Rala's Crystal Scepter and Liandry's Torment. Now the negatives of Malzahar is even though he is fairly easy of a champion to play at the higher levels, it will take a little bit of practice to understand when to use your abilities and in what order, because if you do mess it up, you'll be losing a lot of potential damage output in a team fight. His own ultimate does immobilize him as well, which has always been somewhat of a negative for me since it technically limits to what scenarios you can actually use it. And a lot of champions can abuse his early laning phase since he can't really push in the waves very quickly at the very beginning. But either way guys, if you end up playing Malzahar, which you probably should if he's somehow not banned, then here's my recommended items, runes, and masteries for mid lane Malzahar. I personally like the Morellonomicon, but you can always go Rod of Ages instead, but then you obviously want to have something like a Liandry's Torment if they have a lot of tanks. You want to get a Rala's Crystal Scepter without question, and for masteries, Deathfire Touch is the way to go. Other than that, it should be somewhat self-explanatory. Alright, let's move into champion number 2. This one feels a little questionable, and the reason I say that is because yes, Vladimir has been known to be among the best champions for the past few patches, but if you do look at the win percentages and the statistics of this champion, they aren't really anything too impressive. So I had to do a little bit of extra digging for this specific pick because, I mean, I just wasn't 100% sure on what to do with this champion. So I ended up talking to a few high-elo friends, getting their opinions on him as well, and these guys do main mid lane, and based on what they've told me, Vladimir is OP. He is just a very strong mid laner and you should definitely play him. Now he recently did get a few changes which arguably can be considered nerfs, but for the most part, I mean, it does kind of make his mid lane feel a little bit more kind of mid laney. Because he does benefit more from AP now, which obviously playing a mid laner is not necessarily a bad thing. His late game is just absolutely monstrous. His wave clear isn't really anything to laugh about because his E ability is quite strong in that sense. But the main thing in all honesty is the fact that late game it feels absolutely tilting beyond belief to try and kill a Vladimir because he just doesn't die. His W, his third Q, and his ultimate all give him a bunch of HP, which as you'll see in this example right here is just a little too ridiculous. Now the cons of Vladimir is the fact that yes, it is still considered to be a slight nerf in the greater scheme of things, but again, it's still not that bad. He doesn't really offer any sieging power, which in my opinion is quite important for a mid laner, and he still has a little bit of a minimal CC in his kits, but other than that, still a very strong champion and something you should definitely play. And if you do end up playing him, then here's my recommended build for success. I mean, you want to run Proto Belt if you really feel like you're doing well and you want to sort of snowball your lead. But if you feel like you want to play a little bit of a more safer route, ignore the Proto Belt and replace it instead with something like a Zhonya's. Storm Raider Surge is probably the best keystone as well because he's all about positioning and being in the right place to use his third Q and also use his E, which also is helped by getting Rylai's Crystal Scepter, so pretty good option. But moving into the number 1 spot, we're going to be looking at Viktor. Without question, he has to be the best mid laner at the very moment. He just has so much in his kit right now that it feels a little bit overwhelming. He has a fantastic laning phase with great laning pressure because he gets a shield from his Q, a lot of damage from it. He has very long range poke with his E ability. His W can make a lot of plays happen as well and halt the opponent from making plays on you. He's got great harass potential with his E ability again because of the long range on it, so whether it's the laning phase or you're sieging down towers, this thing is going to be annoying for the enemy to deal with. On top of this, his E ability has fantastic wave clear, especially once you get Rylai's Crystal Scepter, which not only helps the minions stay in the second part of your E ability and even champions, but the damage is just through the roof. He scales very well, he's got a lot of AoE control and damage with his ultimate, his E ability, and even his W in team fights, and I mean, he just really offers a whole lot in his kit. You can ask almost any mid lane main, especially at the higher elos, and they all say and agree that Viktor is without question the best mid laner at the very moment. Now the bad thing is he also has no escapes in his kit, and his playstyle can be a little bit awkward at first because of his E ability and how it works and controlling his ultimate, but he's been out for a very long time, so that can't really be much of an excuse anymore. But either way guys, here's my recommended build for playing Viktor. Not a whole lot to say here, I feel like it should be quite obvious as to what you get and why you get it. But before I end off this video, there are 2 very quick honorable mentions I want to say. The first of which is vel'koz. Personally, I think he's a very strong champion, and I'm very surprised we're not seeing more and more of him. He can shred through tanks, he's got a lot of poke, he's got a lot of damage, his ultimate is just absolutely insane. Why do we not see vel'koz? I really don't understand it. Maybe we'll start seeing him soon, but at the very moment, definitely an honorable mention. But champion number 2 is going to be Taliyah. Now this is a champion you're going to be seeing very frequently, very soon, maybe in a week or 2. I don't want to say too much about Taliyah just yet because I am going to be making a video very soon specifically focused on this champion, so look forward to that. But just know this champion is very strong, people are starting to realize her true strength, and I will not be surprised if we're seeing Taliyah much more frequently in a week or 2. But either way guys, that is about it for this video. There you have it, my top 5 best mid laners for patch 6.13. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to let me know by hitting that like button, subscribe if you haven't, check out my other videos as well, and make sure to share this with your friends. But thank you all so much for watching, and hope to see you for the next one. Peace.